Hello operators, and welcome to another truth-teaching instalment of Educational Enlightenment.
It's like a mediocre Socrates operation mediocrities, yeah. Get it? It's a pun.
This week on Operation Mediocrities we have been discussing teachers and in what ways we imagine the teacher figure and its significance. Despite somewhat different responses, I've gleaned from this discussion a general recognition that teaching is a multifaceted process which sees the academic and the social both playing a part. It was agreed that no matter how knowledgeable a person may be, their capacity for teaching depends on other factors. James, you say you have no interest in teaching as a career despite your intelligence, stating that you lack the patience. Max and Ethan similarly mentioned problems inherent in large class sizes. Now this crowd control mentality is very prominent in perceptions of teaching today, but the image of the classroom teacher standing up to a rebellious, uninterested party of 30+ students is not the only figure of teaching. Ethan's mention of unschooling ties in here. Unschooling registers that the student is an individual with individual desires, interests and preferences. The teacher's function for unschoolers is to be a resource, to offer oneself and one's knowledge to students who choose to follow a particular line of curiosity. In this way, a teacher certainly doesn't have to be your standard classroom figure. I'd argue that teaching by this broader definition is something that many of us do more often than we think. I'd argue that family members, friends, colleagues, sometimes even strangers can be teachers, for they all offer knowledge as an inherent exchange within social relationships. We are all resources for each other's education. As you argued, Ethan, there is something deeply troubling about the common perception that education begins and ends either side of one's school hours. To concentrate one's entire environment of education into a single building or a single body of staff, or to place education entirely into the space of a few years, is to completely misapprehend education as an idea. Max, you suggested that good teachers give you the means by which you can discover. I agree. Indeed, I think regardless of the subject or the physical environment, that is inside a school or otherwise, all teaching aims to do the same thing: to provide the student with languages by which they begin to negotiate the world and its physical and sociological constructs. Knowing stuff, facts, things, though it may very well help an individual to pass their exams, and those things may very well be interesting, is not the ultimate aim of education. It's the language of knowledge that extends beyond the classroom walls. It's a language of numbers and words and molecules and components and thoughts and shapes and images and paradigms. A person who gives you knowledge so you can pass your exams is not a teacher, but a person who invites you to explore the complex manifestations and applications of knowledge is. Many modern teachers are praised for their interesting and engaging approaches to lessons, and this is brilliant. But one doesn't need to make their lessons practical in a hands-on way, or take the class outside or on trips, or blow a hole in the roof with an experiment to make their lesson engaging, though these are all good and effective methods. To be engaging, a lesson must always be practical in a minds-on way. It can be as simple as the free exchange of questions and answers. Some of the most engaging teaching experiences that I've had have involved debates and discussions that position the teacher on an equal level with the students, sharing and considering ideas and opinions alongside them, asking pertinent questions and tackling them in return. A good teacher invites you to discover things as an active participant, not just a passive receiver. This is one of the fundamental challenges facing the education institution as it stands, especially in regards to its exam-based, grade-focused approach to learning. Teaching is imagined too often as a one-way process, but it isn't. Indeed, when I set this topic, one of the questions I neglected to include was whether or not we thought we could ever consider the teacher figure without equally having to consider the student figure too. From your responses, I propose that neither figure can exist in isolation, just as I think knowledge cannot exist in isolation. The entire teaching process exists in social contexts and interactions. Take, for example, a textbook. Now, one may imagine that this resource offers no social interaction. A student reading a book is learning on their own. But this text may raise questions for the student. It may challenge their existing perceptions. It may invoke them to read other texts or to discuss the ideas it holds with other people. It creates dialogues. And in writing the text, the author has participated in their own dialogues with colleagues and academics in the same field or across the history of the discipline. Both writer and reader are learning, engaging with, and applying languages of knowledge. It is an inherently social practice. There may not be an obvious or conventional teacher figure in this example, but the acts of teaching and learning have occurred all the same. Now, people talk about schools preparing kids for the great scary world outside, but the great scary world outside is an extension of the same processes with the same languages. Now, I don't suggest by this that conventional teachers are inadequate or unnecessary, but they are just one manifestation of the teacher figure. Socially, cultures and subcultures, the tensions and cohesions between identities and characters exist in schools and outside of them. The relationships between students and teachers of whatever form in whatever environment are a direct application of the social languages learnt in the process of teaching. So it concerns me how detached the institution of education imagines itself to be, how thoroughly and contradictorily it wants to establish itself as other from the social world. For example, I find school uniforms a fascinating idea, deliberately reducing physical individuation, suggesting that developing social identities distracts from learning, as if academia is a place where the social environment doesn't, or shouldn't, exist. I fear academia is too often understood as a singular environment for the reception and regurgitation of knowledge, and that teachers are an equally singular figure for this purpose, when, quite simply, they are not. Now, I invite comments exploring this and other issues relating to the academic institution down in my pants. There is plenty that can be debated here. I know I've prattled on, so I'll end this swiftly. Max, we'll see you on Friday with our next topic. Till then, there's you.